It was a scorching July afternoon in the heart of the Bronx Zoo, New York. Families were enjoying ice cream. Balloons bobbed on a gentle breeze, creating a picture of a typical Sunday. Suddenly, a deafening, metallic shriek tore through the air. The rusted steel of the lion enclosure fence had given way with a terrifying groan, silencing the crowd. 300 visitors simultaneously turned their heads, their weekend smiles replaced by looks of utter horror. A colossal African lion, his mane dark and deep, Casper, stepped through the twisted debris with the deadly, fluid grace of a king never forgetting his instinct. Screams erupted. Security guards bellowed into walkie-talkies. People scattered, but amidst the chaos, sitting on an old wooden bench, an elderly man with pale blue eyes, Arthur Miller, did not move. His gaze was locked onto the majestic beast more than 60 feet away. The lion let out a roar, a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the concrete pavement. And then Casper began to move, not toward the fleeing crowd, but toward the sole, stationary figure. This is the story of a bond that defied biology, a secret spanning 22 years, and a silent question. Could a king remember the hand that saved his life? The story winds back 22 years, taking us to Brooklyn, New York. Arthur Miller was a semi-retired machinist, living a lonely and weary life in his late 40s after his wife, Eleanor, passed away. He resided in a cramped apartment in the Red Hook area, where the clamor of the port was his only companion. His life was a methodical series of solitary days, waking early, making coffee, reading the paper slowly, and only leaving the house when absolutely necessary. Brief Christmas email greetings from his son in Oregon were his only tenuous link to the outside world. This strict routine served as Arthur's shield against the emptiness in his heart. One cold autumn night, thick fog blanketed the docks. Arthur was cleaning his workshop late when he heard a faint, desperate whimpering coming from the stacked containers. The air smelled faintly of diesel and salty seawater. Donning his greasy, soiled jacket, Arthur used a flashlight to search the damp darkness. His heart was beating strangely fast. The whimpering came again, fainter this time, but more urgent. He found a broken wooden crate wedged between two containers. The lid had a large crack, and dirty straw spilled out around it. And inside, trembling violently, was a lion cub. It couldn't have been more than 2 months old. Its golden coat was soaked in feces and urine, its pale blue eyes barely open with exhaustion. A leather collar was cinched tightly around its soft neck, leaving the surrounding skin red and chafed, evidence that it had been abandoned in this state for too long. Clearly, this was the fallout of a failed, illegal exotic pet trade. "My God," Arthur whispered, kneeling on the wet ground. He knew immediately what he should do: call the police or animal control. But he also pictured the scenario. The cub would be locked up, endure countless investigative procedures, and perhaps slowly die in bureaucratic limbo before finding refuge. "No," he mumbled, taking off his thick coat. "I won't leave you here." He wrapped the shivering cub in his coat, feeling the tiny, convulsing body press against his chest. It was freezing and lighter than a puppy. Arthur hurried it back to his apartment. He made a temporary bed on the bathroom floor with old blankets, gently set the cub down, then warmed milk, mixing in a little honey. The cub drank slowly, with difficulty. Its pale blue eyes were fixed on Arthur's face, and something passed between them, a recognition between two lonely souls. "I'll call you Casper," Arthur said, smiling sadly, like the lost boy in the fairy tale. And so, the strangest and most wonderful period of Arthur's life began. He called in sick to work, confining himself to the apartment to care for Casper. He applied antibiotic ointment to the neck wound, changing the bandage 3 times a day. With each passing day, Casper grew stronger. Within 2 weeks, he could stand. Within a month, he began to play with Arthur's shoelaces, attacking them with humorous seriousness. Casper was not just a cared-for animal. He was a companion. He followed Arthur from room to room, lay at his feet when he read the paper, and curled up on his stomach on cold nights. His deep purr vibrated the coffee cup on the table, and a long-absent smile returned to Arthur's face. However, Casper was growing frighteningly fast. Arthur knew the moment of reckoning was approaching. The decisive event occurred when Casper was 4 months old. Arthur was preparing lunch when he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He dropped the knife, staggering to hold onto the sink. The kitchen spun, and his legs gave way onto the cold tile. Heart attack, he thought with strange clarity. I'm going to die alone. But then he felt a warmth press against his side. Casper, now about 80 pounds, had laid down next to him. He wasn't playing or curious. He simply lay there, his warm body pressed against the man's trembling form. And Casper began to purr, that deep sound, as if trying to vibrate the pain out of Arthur's chest. He buried his face in Casper's soft fur and burst into tears. The pain subsided after a few long minutes. It was only angina, but Casper's instinctive gesture, that unconditional comfort, broke something inside Arthur. This wild animal, who should have seen him as prey, was offering him love and presence. But reality hit just days later. Mr. Johnson, the downstairs neighbor, pounded violently on the door. Miller, what large animal are you keeping in there? My wife heard roaring.
Mr.
Arthur
Johnson,
tried to
wait,
explain it was the TV, but Mr. Johnson pushed the door open and froze. Casper was standing in the middle of the living room, his mane beginning to grow, already the size of a grown Labrador. Oh my God, you're keeping a lion in the apartment. Mr. Johnson screamed and bolted down the stairs. Arthur slammed the door shut, leaning his back against it, his hands shaking. It's over, Casper, he whispered, stroking the soft, round ears. They'll come for me, and they'll take you away. And they came. The police, animal control, and a veterinarian from the Bronx Zoo. Arthur explained everything. Finding Casper, the fear he would die in bureaucratic red tape, and the 4 months he kept him hidden. They listened with stern faces. Mr. Miller, the vet, a Dr. Weber, said, "You broke the law, but you clearly saved his life." Arthur pleaded through tears, "He's my family." Dr. Weber replied, gently, "He is a lion, 80 pounds now, and will grow to 450 pounds. In 6 months, he could kill you even just by playing. You know that." Arthur knew, but the heart does not follow logic. Finally, a deal was struck. Casper would go to the Bronx Zoo, one of the best facilities in America. Arthur would not face criminal prosecution for his life-saving actions, but he was never allowed to own an exotic animal again. That last night, Arthur sat on the floor, Casper's head in his lap. The lion seemed to sense the change. "You'll have a good life," Arthur choked out. "Lots of space, good food, maybe even a lioness. All the things I can't give you." The next morning, when the zoo personnel arrived with the transport crate, Casper growled defensively. But Arthur soothed him, gently guiding him inside. The last lie he told him was, "It's going to be okay." Arthur moved to a small apartment in the Bronx, close to the zoo. He justified it as a new job opportunity, but the truth was he couldn't leave Casper. Every Sunday, he bought a ticket and sat on his familiar bench near the African lion exhibit. Casper, though integrated with the pride, always appeared when Arthur arrived, sitting opposite the glass barrier, staring at the elderly man. It was the silent acknowledgement that lasted 22 years, separated by thick glass and an unchangeable reality. We returned to that fateful July afternoon. The zoo was in unprecedented chaos. Casper, a nearly 450-pound mass of muscle, let out a terrifying roar. The roar was not just a sound. It was a shockwave, turning panic into sheer terror. In the middle of the plaza, a child of about 5, separated from his parents in the crush, stood motionless, completely paralyzed by fear, directly in Casper's path. The lion fixed its attention on the child and began to take slow, predatory steps. And then, Arthur Miller stood up. He ignored the screams of the guards and the sharp pain in his back. His trembling body moved on instinct. "Casper!" His voice was hoarse, weak with age, but it cut through the screaming and echoed across the plaza. Something unbelievable happened. The lion stopped. Its massive head whipped around, ears perked in search, its gaze sweeping the panicked square until they found that familiar, gaunt figure. Time seemed to freeze. Arthur began to walk toward the lion, despite the violent shaking of his legs. "Casper," he repeated, softer this time, his voice breaking. "It's me, your silly old friend." The lion took a step toward Arthur, then another, its eyes never leaving his face. There was no aggression, only the assessment of a predator. Less than a meter away, Arthur could smell the warm, distinctive scent of the predator mingled with a familiar, suffocating odor. He saw the silver threads mixed into Casper's dark mane. His hands were trembling so badly he had to press them tightly against his thighs. "My friend," he whispered. "My old friend." And Casper acted. It wasn't an attack. It was an action anyone who has owned a cat recognizes. The massive, magnificent lion simply walked up and rubbed its huge head against Arthur's chest, pushing so hard it nearly knocked the man over had Casper not braced him. It began to purr. The sound drowned out everything else, shaking the very ground. It was the exact purr from 22 years ago, amplified by 450 pounds of muscle and instinct. Arthur sobbed, wrapping his arms around the lion's thick neck, his fingers sinking deep into the dense mane. Casper licked his tear-streaked face with a rough tongue, rubbing to mark Arthur with a scent, demanding closeness not with aggression, but with affection. "You've gotten so big." Arthur laughed through his tears. "I visit you every Sunday. Did you know?" Casper rumbled in response, not a threat, but a confirmation. Then he lay down at Arthur's feet, his head resting on his front paws, the exact position he used to demand petting as a cub. The zoo staff finally dared to approach. The veterinarian asked Arthur, his voice strained, "Mr. Miller, what is happening?" Arthur looked up, his face still wet. "I saved him as a cub 22 years ago." And he remembered. Arthur, now steady by Casper, spoke softly to him. "Casper, you have to go back. It's not fair, but it's where you're safe." The lion rumbled one last time. Then, with the natural grace of a big cat, he stepped back toward the enclosure. He turned his head once, his gaze locking with Arthur's, a silent farewell. The story spread. By the end of the day, it was national news. Lion recognizes rescuer after 22 years. The video of Casper purring and embracing Arthur went viral worldwide. Arthur was interviewed, photographed, and lauded, but all he wanted was to return to his familiar wooden bench. Following the extraordinary event, a new arrangement was established. The zoo director understood that this bond could not be broken. Arthur was granted special permission, supervised private visits to Casper's back-of-house area every Thursday morning when the zoo was closed for maintenance. And so, a new routine was formed. Every Thursday morning, Arthur walked into the concrete corridor leading to Casper's inner enclosure. And without fail, Casper was always there waiting. He came to the internal barrier, rubbed against it, and began to purr, a sound that made the walls vibrate. Arthur stood there for hours, talking softly, telling Casper about his week, the weather, old memories. Casper listened, eyes half closed, perfectly relaxed and content. This simple act completed Arthur's solitary life. 3 months after that memorable Sunday, on a cold October Thursday morning, Arthur arrived earlier than usual. His heart condition was worsening. Doctors had warned, but he ignored them. He had one last visit to make. Casper was waiting, as always. But this time, as their eyes met across the bars, a quiet understanding, an unspoken goodbye, passed between them. Arthur laboriously sat down on the cold cement floor, ignoring the veterinarian's caution. His hand reached through the bars, sinking deep into Casper's soft mane. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice weak. "Thank you for everything, for showing me that true love needs no words, no logic. It simply exists." Casper pressed his head firmly into Arthur's trembling hand, purring softly. And there, in that cold concrete corridor, the old man closed his eyes, smiling. They found Arthur a few minutes later, still smiling, his hand still resting on Casper's fur. And the lion lay directly opposite, his head pressed tightly against the spot where Arthur's hand had been, guarding his friend one last time. This story is a testament that the deepest connections can transcend species barriers, distance, and time. It reminds us that unconditional love and true recognition are life's greatest comforts. If Arthur and Casper taught us anything, it is that a single moment of kindness can echo through an entire lifetime. Don't let a small act of connection pass you by today. Share this story to remind someone that true recognition is worth the wait. And tell us in the comments, what unexpected bond changed your life?